There is a song you know by heart. You have heard it hundreds of times. You can sing every word without thinking, and the person who recorded it, the person whose voice you hear when you close your eyes, spent years wishing it had never existed. This is not rare. This is not one or two artists having a bad day. This is a pattern that runs through 5 decades of popular music, from the early 1960s through the end of the 1980s and beyond. Smash hits, career-defining records, songs that sold millions of copies and filled arenas for 20 years. Songs their creators quietly, privately, sometimes publicly despised. What makes this worth paying attention to is not the drama of it. It is the mechanics. Because in almost every case, the same forces are at work, a label pushing harder than the artist wanted, a recording session gone sideways, a throwaway joke that somehow climbed to number 1. The artist moves on, the song does not. Some of these stories you will recognize. Most of the details you will not. In 1964, Holland, Dozier, and Holland brought a new song to Motown. They had written it for the Marvelettes, recorded a demo in Gladys Horton's key, and presented it to the group. The Marvelettes listened. Gladys Horton's response was direct. She called it the worst thing she had ever heard. The group passed. The song was reassigned to the Supremes. Diana Ross's reaction when she received the track was not enthusiasm. She complained that the key was wrong, that it sat too low for her voice, and she recorded it with what producer Lamont Dozier later described as a clear attitude. Florence Ballard and Mary Wilson had their own objections. Holland, Dozier, and Holland had written elaborate background harmonies for the two of them. They refused to learn them. After some back and forth, the arrangement was simplified on the spot. Lamont Dozier reflected on this years later and said something that reframes the entire story. He said that the group's frustration, and specifically Diana Ross's detached delivery, what he called her bad attitude in the vocal booth, gave the record a quality no one had planned for. A kind of emotional distance, a hollowness that made the lyric feel tragic rather than sweet. The song went to number 1 in the United States. It was the Supremes' first chart topper. The minimal chant that Ballard and Wilson had only agreed to because they refused to do more became one of the most recognizable vocal hooks in Motown's entire catalog. A song nobody wanted, a performance recorded in frustration.
Two lonely people, we were strangers in the night.
Frank Sinatra was, by 1966, one of the most respected recording artists. He had built a reputation on phrasing, on emotional precision, on the idea that a great singer inhabited a lyric completely. He received "Strangers in the Night," and his response was immediate and unambiguous. He called it a piece of garbage. In various accounts, he used considerably stronger language than that. He told people close to him that the melody was cheap, the lyrics were embarrassing, and that the whole thing evoked, in his words, 2 men meeting in a bar. He thought it was beneath him. He recorded it anyway because the label wanted it, and the numbers suggested it would sell. The song went to number 1. It won him a Grammy for Record of the Year. It ended an 11-year drought during which he had not placed a single at the top of the American charts. And the improvised scat phrase at the end of the record, "Doobie Doobie Doo," became one of the most parodied and imitated moments in his entire discography. Sinatra introduced the song from the stage on more than one occasion by telling the audience directly that he could not stand it, that they were fools for loving it, and then he sang it because they demanded it. He performed it for the rest of his career. He never stopped hating it. Jim Morrison's relationship with fame was complicated from the start. He had come to Los Angeles with notebooks full of poetry, with ideas about shamanism and theater and the edges of consciousness.
Come on, baby, light my fire.
What he ended up with was a rock band, a recording contract, and a song he did not write that became the defining moment of his public life. Light My Fire was written by guitarist Robbie Krieger. The original version ran over 7 minutes. For radio, it was cut to under 3. It reached #1 in the summer of 1967 and turned the Doors into something larger and more commercial than Jim Morrison had imagined or wanted. Morrison's frustration with the song grew steadily. He felt it reduced the band to a pop act. He felt it flattened everything he was trying to do into a simple, radio-friendly hook. In notebooks and interviews, he described it as fundamentally at odds with what he considered the band's real work. He performed it in shows where he grew so bored mid-song that he began distorting the structure, dragging out sections, changing words, doing things that made the rest of the band play around him while trying to hold the performance together. In one documented account, he smashed a microphone stand during a performance of the song out of what appeared to be simple exhaustion with it. His last concert was in December of 1970. He performed Light My Fire. He died in Paris 7 months later. He was 27 years old, and for most listeners, Light My Fire remained the first thing they thought of when they heard his name. Living Loving Maid appeared on the second Led Zeppelin album. It was written quickly, considered filler at the time, and positioned as a companion piece to Heartbreaker on the record. The riff is memorable. The lyrics reference a real person, a woman who had attached herself to the band's orbit in a way the members found uncomfortable. Jimmy Page has been consistent about this. He did not want the song to exist. He exercised what has been described as a total veto over any live performance of it. In more than a decade of touring across hundreds of concerts on multiple continents, Led Zeppelin never played Living Loving Maid live, not once. Page's control over the band's set lists was significant, and this song was the clearest example of what that control looked like in practice. Fans who knew the album loved the track. It made no difference. After the band dissolved, Robert Plant played the song in his solo shows. Jimmy Page did not revisit it. As of the band's reunion performances, it remained absent. The veto has outlasted the band itself. Rick Nielsen wrote this song in roughly 5 minutes. He has said so himself. He described the finished product as so silly, total pop, and characterized it as Cheap Trick doing ABBA. His tone when discussing it has ranged from fond amusement to mild disbelief. The song was recorded for the 1977 studio album In Color. The studio version was released. It did not perform particularly well. The band moved on. 2 years later, a live concert album recorded in Japan, Cheap Trick at Budokan, was released in the United States. The live version of I Want You to Want Me, recorded in front of a Japanese audience, became the song that broke the band in America. It reached the top 10. It became the track that radio played. It became the encore that audiences waited for. Nielsen, reflecting on this later, said he wished he had been that stupid more often. The song that required the least effort, that he conceived as a deliberate throwaway, paid for his children's education. That is a direct quote. Not the careful craft, not the more ambitious material. The 5-minute ABBA joke. The Budokan version almost did not make the American album. The label was uncertain about releasing a live record from Japan. The band pushed for it. The fact that the song nearly missed its own breakthrough is not a minor detail. Chrissie Hynde's objection to releasing Brass in Pocket as a single was not ambiguous. The phrase that has been documented, appearing in multiple accounts, is that it would go out over her dead body. She thought the song was too obvious, too commercial. She could hear exactly what it would do, and she did not want it to do that. The band's manager disagreed. The producer disagreed. The record label disagreed. Everyone around her saw what she heard, but reached the opposite conclusion. The single was released over her objection. It went to #1 in the United Kingdom. It became the opening statement of what new wave meant on the radio in 1979. It is still the first song most people think of when they think of the Pretenders. Hind has spoken about this more than once. What comes through in those accounts is not simply that she was wrong and everyone else was right. It is that she understood precisely what the song would do and did not want it to do that. The commercial instincts she resisted turned out to be correct. That is a different thing than being surprised. She has performed the song thousands of times since. The Beastie Boys wrote "You Gotta Fight for Your Right to Party" as a parody. This is documented clearly, including in material the band themselves released. The song was constructed as a deliberate, over-the-top send-up of knucklehead party culture. The point was the joke. The target was the exact demographic that ended up embracing it. When the song became a massive commercial hit, it brought with it an audience that had entirely missed the irony. College students and fraternity houses adopted it as a genuine anthem. The satirical content was received as sincere content. The mockery became the thing being celebrated. In the liner notes to their 1999 compilation, The Sounds of Science, the band addressed this directly. They said the song sucks. Not that it was misunderstood, not that they regretted the timing. It sucks. For years, they were reluctant to perform it live. The track had locked them into a one-dimensional public image at a moment when they were trying to move toward more serious and more varied work. Every time they played it, the audience who had taken the joke at face value cheered. The song still gets played. It still gets cheered. The joke is still being missed. Mike Score has been explicit about this in multiple interviews. The line he keeps returning to is some version of, "Every time I perform live, everyone just wants to hear, 'I ran,' and I'm sick of it." "I Ran, So Far Away" was a Flock of Seagulls breakthrough. The synthesizer line, the layered production, and Score's hairstyle, a sculptural arrangement that became immediately iconic, turned the band into one of the defining images of early 1980s music video culture. Score does not think it is the band's best song. He has pointed to Space-Age Love Song specifically as an example of work he considers more representative and more sophisticated. His view is that the band's actual catalog was buried under the weight of one track and one haircut. He keeps performing it because audiences demand it. There is something specific to the music video era in this story. The visual image attached to "I Ran" was so strong and so immediately reproducible that it generated a kind of cultural shorthand the song itself could not escape. To a generation of listeners, the song and the hair and the video are a single object. The rest of the discography exists in its shadow. Simple Minds did not want to record this song. The documented accounts say the band declined it 5 or 6 times before finally agreeing. The track was written by Keith Forsey and Steve Schiff specifically for the soundtrack of The Breakfast Club. John Hughes had requested a new song, and the material came to Simple Minds as an outside submission. Jim Kerr and the rest of the band were focused on their own writing. They found the track, in Kerr's framing, unhip. A song written for teenage American school kids, not where they saw themselves. The label applied pressure. The band eventually agreed. Don't You Forget About Me went to #1 in the United States. It became the band's only American chart topper and remains, for the majority of their listeners in North America, their defining work. A song they rejected repeatedly, written by someone else, recorded reluctantly, for a film they had no prior connection to. The irony of this one carries a particular weight. The song's lyric is about being remembered, about not being forgotten. The band that did not want to record it has been remembered, in large part, for nothing else. Brown-Eyed Girl is the song most people think of when they hear Van Morrison's name. It is recognizable within the first 2 seconds. It has been used in films, television, advertisements, and celebrations for decades.
A brown-eyed girl.
Van Morrison has spent much of his career keeping his distance from it. His resistance has taken several forms over the years. He declined to own the publishing rights initially. He avoided performing it live for extended stretches. In interviews, he has characterized it as a relic of an early recording contract with Bang Records, a period and a label relationship he has consistently described with some bitterness. The song, in his view, is not representative of his artistic identity. It is a remnant from before he became the artist he intended to be. The music he considers central to his work, the Celtic soul explorations, the spiritual investigations, the long improvisational pieces, exists in a catalog that casual listeners mostly do not reach. The song that follows him everywhere is the lightest, most radio-ready thing he recorded in that period. He performs it sometimes. The relationship with it has shifted over the years, become less combative and more complicated. But the core frustration has never fully resolved. The most covered, most recognized thing he ever did is the thing he would least choose to define him. Billy Joel wrote Piano Man in 1973 while working as a lounge singer at a bar in Los Angeles called the Executive Room. He had taken the job under a pseudonym, Bill Martin, partly to fulfill a contractual obligation while in a dispute with his first record label. The song is drawn directly from that experience: the barflies, the waitress, the old man with his beer, and his memories. It is repertoire as much as composition.
Well, I'm sure that I could be a movie star.
It became his signature, and it became, over the decades that followed, something Joel has described with visible ambivalence. In interviews across multiple decades, he has returned to the same frustration. Roughly 90% of people who come to see him perform want to hear Piano Man. It's the first request. It is the song audiences hold up signs for. It is what people are waiting for when they sit down. Joel has noted that he does not like it much, that performing it night after night for 50 years has stripped it of whatever personal meaning it once held. There is a specific quality to this kind of fatigue that is different from the other stories in this collection. Joel did not record the song reluctantly. He did not fight the label over releasing it. It was not a parody or a joke. It was a genuine piece of autobiographical writing that worked exactly as intended. What wore him down was repetition across a lifetime. The song is about people who are stuck, people who had other plans and ended up somewhere smaller than they imagined. Joel wrote it at 23, looking around a nearly empty bar in Los Angeles, wondering if he was becoming one of those people. He still plays it, every night, because the crowd demands it. And somewhere in that loop, if you look at it long enough, the song starts to describe its own singer. Randy Meisner sang the lead vocal on Take It to the Limit. The song required him to hit and sustain a high note at the climax that was at the outer edge of his range. In a controlled studio environment, under ideal conditions, he could do it. On the road, night after night, he could not always do it. By 1977, during a tour that had been running for months, Meisner was dealing with a flu and an ulcer. At a show in Knoxville, he performed the song and then refused an encore. Glenn Frey's response was not sympathetic. The confrontation that followed has been described as physical. The specific language Frey used to pressure Meisner has been documented, and it was not gentle. Meisner left the band shortly after. The Eagles rarely performed Take It to the Limit after his departure. The note that had made the song an audience favorite was tied to the one voice that could reach it, and that voice was gone. What remained was a hit that had driven its own singer out of the band and then became, in its absence, a reminder of what had been lost. Warren Zevon was, by any reasonable assessment, a serious songwriter. His catalog includes complex, literary, often dark material. He worked with some of the most respected musicians in Los Angeles. He was not primarily a comic songwriter. Werewolves of London was written in approximately 15 minutes in 1975. Phil Everly of the Everly Brothers had suggested, in a casual conversation, that Zevon write a song based on a 1935 horror film. Zevon, along with two collaborators, sat down and produced the lyrics quickly. None of them took it seriously. They nearly forgot they had written it. When the song was eventually recorded and released in 1978, it peaked at number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was Zevon's only top 40 hit, his only one from a catalog that runs deep and rewards repeated listening. Zevon was candid about his feelings. He acknowledged the song was funny. He also said more than once that he wished the thing that had reached the most people was something that provoked a different kind of feeling, something with the weight of the music he admired most. He kept performing it because audiences expected it. He never stopped finding the situation somewhat absurd. He died in 2003. Werewolves of London remains his most played song by a considerable margin. Across genres, decades, and personalities, the pattern keeps repeating, and it runs deep underneath all of these individual stories. The songs that lasted, the ones that defined careers and outlived their creators' preferences, were often the songs that arrived with the least intention behind them. The 5-minute joke, the recording made with a bad attitude, the parody that audiences absorbed as the real thing, the track a band rejected 6 times before agreeing to record. The songs that artists poured themselves into most carefully, the ones they believed in most completely, frequently disappeared. The ones recorded in frustration or indifference or pure commercial calculation kept playing. Lamont Dozier said it plainly about Where Did Our Love Go? The group's annoyance became the record's quality. The coldness was the feeling. The thing they brought to the session without meaning to was the thing that made it work. That's not always how these stories end. Sometimes an artist's discomfort with a song reflects real judgment about its quality. Sometimes they are right to be embarrassed, but the frequency with which the opposite is true, the frequency with which the song they could not stand turned out to be the one that mattered, suggests something about what music actually does when it travels from the person who made it to the people who receive it. If you found this interesting, let us know in the comments. Which of these surprised you most? And thanks for watching.